Okay, we're live. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the very exciting segment of our Lunch and Learn webinar series. My name is Mary Beth Iyer, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you very much for attending this broadcast. Today, we'll do an introduction to Mesa Laboratories Torque Testers' various market applications. But first, let me just state that the stream is broadcast on our YouTube channel. For the best viewer experience, we recommend watching the feed in full screen. Full screen can be accessed via the rectangular icon in the lower right corner. If you want to leave a comment or ask something, please address the live chat sidebar, which is found on the right-hand side of the video feed in normal YouTube view. If you're watching this in the full screen mode or via smartphone, hit escape or rotate your device to portrait mode for smartphones and enter any questions or comments in the live chat box. Then we'll answer those after the presentation. Unfortunately, many older browsers and Windows XP machines no longer support the live stream encoding. If you get a message on the YouTube screen saying unable to display video, just save the link and come back in a couple hours after the presentation's over. We'll have it up, and on the YouTube screen, you'll be able to watch the recorded session of the recorded version of the live session that we're going to start now. Certainly, if you feel any of your associates would benefit from the content delivered today, please do not hesitate to share this link you used today. Also, if there's any additional information or technical services that my company can provide relative to this or any other equipment we represent, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Life Scientific Inc. specializes in the representation of pharmaceutical production equipment, largely for parenteral applications. We are based in St. Louis, Missouri, with offices and project engineers additionally located in Illinois and Minnesota. From aseptic environments through container integrity testing, our company has been involved in over 5,000 equipment projects throughout the Midwest. Detailed information can be found on our website. We began representing the representation of Mesa Labs a long time ago. Mesa Labs, Inc. is a growing public company based in Denver, Colorado. Mesa develops, manufactures, and markets high-quality process validation and monitoring instruments and consumables. From Fortune 500 companies to high-tech startups, Mesa Labs products are used to assure product quality control, manufacturing processes, and to solve problems in niche markets in healthcare, industrial, pharmaceutical, medical, and food processing applications. Mesa Labs products are characterized by technical excellence and superior industry reputation. With all that behind us, I'd like to invite Gabor Zakic, who's currently Senior Business Consultant at Mesa Labs and has been through every aspect of Mesa Labs product manufacturing. Now let's enjoy what Gabor has prepared for this webinar.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabor, and I would like to start this presentation that I'm trying to focus on the pharmaceutical industry and FDA-regulated industries. Mary Beth has done a good introduction to Mesa Labs, so I will probably just skip this slide and start the presentation with the agenda. So what I'd like to talk about today is review why closure torque testing is important and take a look at the regulatory field, what regulations are important from the torque testing point of view. Then look at the operator safety concerns and our solutions to those concerns. Take a look at the electronic record keeping compliance it takes and what we offer. And as far as the good manufacturing practices, I will take some examples or look at some examples as far as child-resistant closure testing, tamper-evident closure testing, and then take a look at some other considerations such as clean room and corrosion resistance. So why cap torque is important? The torque applied on a threaded closure has a major impact on the seal integrity and consequently the customer's perception of the product quality, the appearance and functionality of the package, how easy it is to open or reseal the closure, and proper torque or the lack of tightness could greatly influence the potency, the appearance, discoloration, stability of the product. So in this regulatory overview, I just wanted to give you an idea of what regulations have an impact on what you should be doing as far as torque testing. This is just a list from the FDA CGMP requirements, and the parts that are related is 21 CFR 210 and 211. And then as far as the tamper-evident closures, the requirements are included in 21 CFR 211.132. And also for the child-resistant closures and the Poison Prevention Act, I wanted to point out 16 CFR 1700. And for the electronic record compliance, you want to know about 21 CFR Part 11 and review the requirements in there as it relates to electronic record keeping and signatures and electronic documentation. And from the testing point of view, I wanted to point out that the US Pharmacopeia has a chapter on container and closure performance testing. And these chapters are 659, 661, 671, and 1207. The last one is on closure integrity testing. And it's also many times I found that pharmaceutical companies are more concerned about safety, the operator safety, than other companies. And from that perspective, I wanted to take a look at the related OSHA regulations, and then how MESA is dealing with preventing injuries to the operators. So I wanted to start with the safety and just show you this slide about how repetitive motions create a problem in a work environment. And torque testing is, manual torque testing is obviously a repetitive motion. And our strength is that we automate the manual process probably more than anyone else in the field. And this is just a good chart to see, how much damage is caused by repetitive workplace or motion injuries. One, as it relates to the USP 671 container performance testing standard, the standard calls for closing and opening 12 screw cap containers 30 times. And if you have a number of batches, a number of different container sizes that you have to deal with, then obviously 360 samples for each package design, that's a large number of containers. So you want to make sure that the operators are, instead of using a manual tester, they would be using an automated device. The risk with the repetitive motion injury is that when you test these large batches, your wrist and shoulder motion, the joints can create a stress or strain on them. And same thing with the CRC caps. Some of the CRC cap designs require so much top load that after testing 300 and more samples, it really creates an ergonomic problem. And so is the higher gripping pressure and friction that's required to squeeze and grip the closures and open them. There are some tricks that you can do, for example, using a strap wrench, but ideally you really should be looking at something to automate the process. And that leads me to my next slide, which is an example of how we utilize automated bottle clamping, automated cap gripping, and automated rotation. And in this example, you can also see our automatic product detection, where in the bases, we incorporated some magnets. And underneath the platform, there are some sensors that are detecting the presence of the magnets in the bases. And once you place the platform, and this is where I turn it upside down, and you can see the location of the magnet. And once you place it on the platform, the screen automatically changes to the correct recipe. So this is also helping with world-class manufacturing implementations, because the more you can minimize the operator's involvement on how to change the recipe, the more likely that your setup and your testing will be repeatable. And as far as the ergonomic improvement, it's obvious that you can just start the test by pressing push buttons instead of manually clamping the bottle and manually doing anything. The automated rotation takes away the repeatability issues too. Top load is mechanically controlled and repeatable, and the bottle and cap gripping pressures can be monitored and documented as well. So on the next slide, I just wanted to give you a review of what else could be done to further automate things. These are all benchtop machines for testing batches of caps or containers. And this is just to give you an idea of what else can be done. And on the next slide, I wanted to briefly show you the potential issues in the pharmaceutical industry or field. We have run into applications when the customer wanted to test blood products, where it was a requirement to protect the operator from spills. And it is also a possibility, mostly in the beverage industry, especially with beer testing, when the bottle is glass and it's also pressurized. So if there's a micro crack or something and we do a torque test, there is a chance of the bottle breaking and some projectiles hitting an operator. So in that respect, we came up with a few guard design options, and you can see that on this screen for our different models. And as far as the pinch points or removing pinch points from our automated machines, we came up with an implementation of an anti-bridging, anti-tie down, anti-repeat dual actuation hand controls or safety control. So with the anti-bridging, it's just physically difficult to press the two push buttons at the same time. With the anti-tie down, we have the logic in the programmable logic controller that monitors the start switches. So if an operator would tie down one of the switches, it might work for the first cycle, but it will definitely not work for any of the successive cycles. Also, there is a 500 milliseconds delay that is a window of opportunity for the operators to start the test. If they don't press two push buttons within 500 milliseconds, the test will not start. And the anti-repeat functionality is just, it requires that the operator releases both push buttons before a new cycle can be started. To increase safety more, we added mini regulators to our machines, to our pneumatically actuated machines. So if that's a concern, the operator or the mechanic can reduce the pressure in the individual actuators to further limit the possibility of causing any harm. And if for any reason they can still manage to put fingers between the pinch points. And we also provide e-stop as a standard on our ST120 servo model. With the safety out of the picture, I wanted to take a quick look at the 21 CFR Part 11 electronic record keeping compliance and how we support it. So typically, we recommend that our torque tester is not used for managing data, but instead it transfers data to 21 CFR Part 11 compliant record keeping system. It is just easier to implement or satisfy the requirements on a PC-based system than it is on the PLC. And as far as communication options, We provide RS-232 USB, and for longer distances, wired and wireless LAN options to communicate with the tester. The SPC software does not have to be dedicated to a tester, but to RTORC tester, but it can be taking measurement data from weight scales, leak testers, any other analyzers, basically, so you can have all your quality data collected in a single system. Mesa, with Mesa, we often customize the data output depending on the customer specification, because many times what we find that one customer has one type of SPC or data acquisition system, another customer has a different one, so they all have different requirements as far as the data output rate or the format of the string, and we can customize those to meet the specifications for each customer. And as far as the record keeping compliance on the software side, we recommend our Torque IQ software, which has user access level control, and it can be integrated with the Windows Active Directory from your company's server or domain. And the data is stored in an encrypted and password protected secure database. But I believe the data source could be also set to other non-Microsoft database products as well, if that's what your preference is. And we provide, or the software provides, once it's turned on, because it's a feature, it provides audit trail for logins, configuration changes, and basically anything that the operator or the administrator does to the software. And examples of SPC softwares that are compliant with, or that can be made compliant with 21 CFR Part 11 are Infinity QS, WinSPC, Zontec, and some other. On the next slide, I wanted to take a look at child-resistant closure testing. And this is just a chart to show you that since the inception of the idea of child-resistant closures, which is late 60s, early 70s, how far or how much the incidents, the poisoning incidents dropped. And you can see that's a considerate drop. But I was just reading some articles about it, and it appeared that in Asia, they still have many incidents. And in that regard, wanted to show you, that the common agents could be anything from over-the-counter to prescription medication. And interestingly, although it's not required by the FDA or the USCPSC, PET medications have been also known to be involved in poisoning cases, even though child-resistant packaging is not yet required for PET medications. Other than that, household products, bleach, disinfectants, pesticides, herbicides, they have been all known to be involved in poisoning cases. And as far as prevention, obviously there are the keeping it out of the way of children is one way, and the other is making sure that we use original child-resistant packaging. And for the CR package testing and requirements, I wanted to point it out that the package testing protocol and the torque testing are two different things. So when there's a company doing torque testing for QA in a production environment, that's different from the requirement that's described in 16 CFR Part 1700, which is the protocol for the actual testing with children and adults, because they want to make sure children cannot open the closure, but they want to make sure that older people, the elderly, can still open the closures. And here, this is just a slide with the four major categories of child-resistant closures. We don't typically deal with the push latch and turn, or the lineup marks and turn type of closures, but most of our jobs are related to push cap down and turn or the squeeze and turn type of closures, and we can test both of those. And also wanted to point it out that the ASTM F250 subcommittee maintains a large number of child-resistant package designs and their classification standard. It's definitely an interesting read if you care about child-resistant packages. And this is the standard classification the US CPSC is also working with. There are 8 categories of the CR package designs, and in each category there are up to like 15 types of child-resistant designs. And I just wanted to call this out because oftentimes we run into new and different child-resistant closures, and one test method that we made for or we optimized for a specific design may not work for the other design. So it's just interesting that not all these child-resistant caps are the same, and they may all require some different customizations when we do the testing for them. This slide is just an overview of the standards, the ASTM and international standards that are related to child-resistant closure testing. Some of them not only limited to child-resistant closures, but this will give you an idea of where to look for specific standards. One thing, there may be some expired standards in this one, but it's still interesting to know about all those, the reverse ratchet. And I'm not sure if I have removed the shelling test from here. So the shelling would be another interesting test to perform, although it's not torque testing related. But people don't always think about how when you give a cap to a child or a package, they could actually shell the outer piece with their teeth and engage the features, and that way it becomes relatively easy to open. So that would be another interesting test to perform. As far as our capabilities, this is just an example of how one of our ST120 servo models look after we added the child-resistant feature or the digital top load monitoring on it. You can see how the sensor is mounted on the bottom left side, and on the bottom or the top left side, you have a view to the mini regulators and the back panel. Those are the mini regulators with which we can adjust the downward pressure, and then we have a sensor both for the pressure monitoring and the force monitoring. And on the screen on the right side, you can see the upper screen or the upper part of the screen is showing the torque, and on the lower part of the screen you can see how the top load changes as the cap is being rotated. With this feature, you can record and visualize the correlation between the top load and the torque. It's also one of those things that we don't often think about, but the more top load you put on the cap, the more torque will it require to release the cap, because some of that top load basically becomes friction or resistance between the threads. This top load option is strain gauge based, it's easy to calibrate, and it's numerically controlled. And the servo chuck, we use the servo chuck pretty much as a standard on all of our machines now, and it allows the chuck to rotate up to like 200 RPM or as low as 0.5 RPM, and it will let you simulate both an elderly person's hand and also a faster servo chuck capper. This is just an example of one of the ST120s with a customized clamping table that has the top load functionality and a universal chuck. This was actually built for Georgia Tech Research Institute. The reason I included is because they actually used this design to develop a senior-friendly CR closure for Pfizer, and they ended up finalizing their closure by and the package by changing to a square bottle, because they found it's easier for the older people to grab a square bottle than a round bottle. And they ended up putting some rubber coating on their cap, which provided more friction, so it was easier for them to open. And at Georgia Tech, because they were gonna try many different cap designs, and you can actually see it on the pictures, the universal 4-post cap gripping tool. It lets them grip from a small vial all the way up to like a bigger jar, and it lets them test continuous thread or child-resistant closures. So it's a very flexible setup. It's in that regard, it was required for them. And they also wanted to minimize safety concerns by incorporating this manual platform lifting mechanism. The next slide, it was just another project where the customer was a cap manufacturer of child-resistant closures. They didn't care about the bottle, and they only wanted to verify or quality, assure the quality of the caps. So they ended up coming up with a fixture that holds the cap, and they are testing the release torque and the reverse ratchet torque on this fixture. And this is fully automated. This does not have the manual actuation, but they dedicated this machine to this single cap only. And on the right side, you can see a test actually running with, excuse me, with different bottles and different child-resistant caps. And then there's also the screen that I already showed you, with the upper part showing the torque and the bottom showing the top load graphs. In the next slides, I'm going to go over the good manufacturing practice considerations for the torque testers. And these are called out in 21 CFR Part 210 and 211. Just wanted to give you some ideas of the common recalls that would be avoidable by incorporating torque testing in a quality assurance program. So some of these FDA warning and recalls are referring to defective containers. Bottles may not have tamper evidence seals properly seated. Complaints of leaking bottles, which could be cracked cap, like some of those pictures show on the right side. Missing seals, which would also show up on a torque test, because torque test result will be different on a cap that doesn't have the seal than one that has the seal. They are also sometimes they find problems with the CR closure when the outer shell is too tight, and even though you're not applying any top load force on the top, if you just rotate freely without any top load, it could potentially engage and release the cap, at which point it loses its functionality. And in some other cases, which is not really a torque testing issue, but they found that manufacturers or producers were selling products that would have required a CR cap, and they didn't put a CR cap design on it. Sometimes they find multiple liners in closures, and it's probably most often that stability tests are failing. There are discolored tablets in a package, or the potency or sterility tests fail. Also, common issue, calibration related. If the calibration records are not maintained or documented, that's another problem. Here, just wanted to give you an idea about the problem with the manual torque testing process. So the cap gripping is definitely a variable if you have manual operators, and a varying cap gripping pressure can introduce error in the torque testing. And in the middle, you see a picture of a narrow cap, which is probably not happening in the pharmaceutical industry, although some creams may be requiring FDA control and have a very narrow or short cap design. In those cases, the problem is how do you grip and grab the cap without touching the container. So that's just another reason why we want to automate these tasks. And as far as the type of gripping, there are two major possibilities. One with the three digital, which is typically applied by children, and the bidigital, which is applied by elderly people typically. This is just to give you an idea of what other consideration needs to be put in the CR closure design, and also when you're testing, whether you want to test for the opening from the perspective of the children or from the perspective of the elderly people with the arthritis. So we have that. We consider that also when we came up with our bidigital cap gripper, which is also called fatigue resistant chalk, and that allows the cap to be grabbed primarily from 2 points. And then the tri-digital cap gripper, which is our standard collet design for the short torque testers, that will allow gripping the container from 3 points. And there's also a chart below those pictures to show that the gripping pressure influences how the gripping pressure can influence the removal torque on a closure. And you can also see that at 70 psi, the cross section of the closure is distorted as opposed to the much more optimal 40 psi. The cross section is intact, and that's what we would recommend for setting the chalk to. And this is just a review of all our different chalk assemblies for the different cap designs. So starting from the left, we have an example of a palm gripper, which allows us to grip the cap of pump dispenser closures. And then we have a CRC design of the CRC chuck design and the floating chuck design. CRC stands for child resistant closures, if that wasn't clear. And then that chuck can be set to mechanically apply any top load between 0 and 20 pounds. And the next one is a floating chuck, which is primarily for testing caps that have a temper evident feature or temper evident band. And we can also use it for ROPP, which is not typical in the pharmaceutical industry, but for the temper evident band capability, I definitely wanted to add it to this group. And then there's a serrated chuck design and the universal chuck design. Both have their pros and cons. Both can be very good to work with. You just have to understand the limitations and the strengths of these designs. And the next slide, I wanted to show a problem, repeatability and reproducibility problem as far as the manual clamping or some other torque testers have this clamping mechanism where you clamp the bottle at the bottom, and there's nothing wrong with it as long as, again, the operators understand how to set these clamping fingers up properly, and how to test the system properly. But I wanted you to be aware that if you distort the bottle, or if you throw the center of the rotation from the center of the clamping platform, that will introduce some torque errors in the measurement. And here's an example of a spring-based needle and peak indicator type torque tester, and below is a digital torque tester. These are both manual devices, and my intention was here to show that both of them can display large standard deviation for our magnetic gold reference, gold bottle torque reference. And that gold bottle is it has a very repeatable breakaway torque. But if your operators are not controlling their wrist motion, they can still get so much variation in the torque readout, because the speed of the rotation is very important when we do the torque tests. And from that perspective, again, automated torque testing has a huge benefit because the rotation of the cap is fully automated. And this slide is just showing you again that you can use an automated tester and just place the bottle on it, press the 2 push buttons. It will always clamp it the same way, always grip the cap the same way, and always ramp up the torque the same way. As far as the CGMP calibration, verification, validation concerns, I just wanted to point out 21 CFR 1820 and 211 as far as the calibration related regulations. It should be noted that the weights should be traceable to a national standard, and it's critical from their perspective that you do the calibration in scheduled intervals, and there's a written calibration program at your facility, and you record the calibrations, you apply stickers on the machines, and calibration records are available in your documentation system. Because this could be another major reason why products could be recalled. Also wanted to give you an idea about the verification, which is different from the calibration, because the verification can be very quick. You just place this magnetic torque reference on the torque tester, and all you do is just run it just like if it was another regular product, and it will give a readout on the torque tester display. If the readout is not within the stated torque value on the gold bottle, then you know that the torque tester is going out of tolerance, and you should recalibrate, or you should have it serviced. The gold bottle is available in 3 different sizes: large, standard, and small. It has 2 repelling and 2 attracting magnetic peaks, but all of those peaks are within 0.2 inch-pounds of each other. So it is very highly repeatable. Both the calibration kit and the gold bottle, or the weights in the calibration kit, or the gold bottles, or the torque tester themselves should be on an annual recalibration schedule, where you should verify the calibration with these devices, hopefully even on a daily basis, so you can catch any issues early on. We use NIST traceable weights, and that's required by the standard also. And we follow the calibration procedure according to the STM standard D3474. And if you don't have anyone who does calibration services for you, just know that Mesa is an ISO 17025 accredited calibration lab, and that's where we train our technicians who go out and calibrate the machines. We also offer in-house and on-site validation services and training services as well, if you need them. As far as some other considerations, it is interesting to know that there are these tamper-evident closures out there, and some cap designs that incorporate a ratcheting feature that does not allow the cap to rotate freely after it has been applied. But these features also make removal torque testing pretty much obsolete, because we don't know whether we measure the break of the tamper-evident band or we measure the thread break. And therefore, instead of measuring release torque on these closures, I recommend measuring application angle, or a combination of angle and torque. So you have a better idea of the seal integrity. Because if we rotate the cap, if we tighten the cap more, we can monitor at what point did it start rotate, or at what torque level it started rotating, and from that data we have a good idea of how loose or tight the cap was to start with. I also wanted to call out that in a clean room environment, some of our machines are more optimized for it with the stainless steel enclosure, and we have compressed air exhaust port specifically, or we can also put a filter on that port, so we don't just exhaust the incoming air into the clean room environment, but we run it out, or we exhaust it through a fine filter. And we provide on most of the machines smooth surfaces for cleanability. And I also like personally to check the corrosion resistance with the customer specific cleaning chemicals. Some of them can be very demanding. Some other examples that are related to the process, where I've seen process variation causing torque readout variations. One example on the left side is when the bottle was filled with a product that had a high sugar content, and there were spills during the filling, so that the product was basically turning into a thread locking material between the threads, producing extremely high torques too. And then in that respect, I also wanted you to know that the dwell time is extremely critical. So when you establish a torque testing program, you want to make sure that the time between the application of the cap and the removal of the cap is maintained, and you understand if there's a difference in that time, what the implications are, how much lower the torque will be, or how much higher the torque could be. And those torque reductions or the loss of torque retention could be related to issues with like this spill, or it could be related to something like the induction sealing. And that's also very interesting if you haven't already noticed that during the induction sealing, it's common to see a torque loss of up to 50% between the pre-induction seal torque value and the post-induction seal torque value. And one of the last slides is related to our fully automated torque tester, the ST Inline. And this is just showing you an application example of a production line that was running below 20 BPM, 20 bottles per minute. And we can put the ST Inline directly on a production line like that. But if the production line is faster than 20 bottles per minute, you can use a diverter, a high speed or a lower speed diverter, run the samples or direct the samples on the testing conveyor, and place the ST Inline on the testing conveyor. This will allow fully automatic product handling and bottle clamping, cap gripping, no variation at all. The servo drive is still programmable, and it allows you to program any torque clamp and angular speed. So you can simulate either a production capper or a human hand. And the test modes are programmable, and it allows, or the system allows you to program either application release torque or application release angle based result validation. And the system includes a graphical touchscreen. It also has a high resolution digital analog to digital encoder. And I already mentioned that we provide ISO 17025 accredited calibration lab and services, and support traceability and documentation requirements of FSMA and 21 CFR Part 11 electronic record keeping compliance through integration with compliance software. And just the bottom line is basically a business case looking at a number of cappers and number of sample collections you take, and what would be your return on investment over time. How many technician hours can you save by utilizing an automated tester? And I believe this is the last slide, and it just gives you an idea of different implementations, different product sizes, different toolings, different line speeds. And on the left side, at the top, the system has a reject lane, and the conveyor is divided to an acceptable and reject lane. On the right top, it's a smaller glass bottle, and the customer was interested in running the system at a higher speed. So that's probably running around 20, 25 bottles per minute. And the other examples are standard. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, either in email or right now, I would be more than happy to answer them if I can.
Okay, we have one question that came in live, and it's a question asking you, Gabor, if Mesa Labs produces testing solutions for tamper-evident caps on tubes, like cream paste tubes, toothpastes, and similar products.
Yes, tamper-evident. I haven't seen tamper-evident closures on tube containers or tube packages. Well, we have done testing on tube packages, and I could even probably bring it up, but it's probably best if we can record the information of whoever's asking the question. I would be more than happy to send them examples of applications that we worked on that are similar to their situation.
Okay, sounds good.
Because I could show you an application picture right now. It's just, it would take some time for me to find it. I don't want to bore anyone with it.
No worries, we can set up a meeting with the interested customer here, with the client potential, and we'll discuss this question later on.
Okay, is that the only question we have for now?
Yeah, that's the only one that came in live.
Okay.
Okay.
If anyone has any other questions, don't hesitate to, give us send us an email or give us a call, and we will definitely deal with you individually. So thank you, Gabor, for your extremely comprehensive overview on the Mesa Labs pharma product line. I'm convinced the audience found this presentation quite informative. We're currently scheduling dates for on-site demos of our torque testing equipment, obviously not the inline, but we've got the tabletop models in the shop, and we can definitely schedule those. It has some amazing features like interchangeable tooling, simplicity of use, all the information that Gabor gave you, test data storage, many others. If interested in seeing this equipment in action, please reach out to us and we will set that up. So if there is no other questions or information on the Mesa information, I would like to just let you know that our next webinar will take place on March 28th. And together with Diego Bergeri of LF of America, which is another company we represent, we'll go over the most complex challenges when it comes to unit dose delivery systems and fill and seal equipment and services. We'll also account for many of the frequently asked questions and other requests that we'll encounter on the upcoming client meetings and site visits, which we're setting up now. We're sure that this segment will be very informative and educational, so we strongly advise you to go on site and register for the broadcast as soon as possible. Again, my thanks to Gabor for taking his time here today, and for all of you who attended. I hope you found it quite beneficial, and expect to hear from you regarding demos of the Torco 1600 or the ST120S. So thank you all, and goodbye.